Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for Ahsoka Episode 6, and I thought this was a fantastic episode. We finally got reveals about, what is the end of this hyperspace path into a different galaxy. And the episode just really leaned into that kind of fantasy aspect of Star Wars. It was aware that whatever we see on this other side, kind of has to be interesting, has to deliver. And I think there was some really nice kind of lore, world building reveals that ended up happening here. And I just think the setup for the next couple of episodes is quite strong, as they actually delivered on some stuff. Like, we got Ezra in this episode, we got Thrawn in this episode, and some of the kind of character, kind of drama things are beginning to come together as they tease what Balin kind of has planned and little bits and pieces like that. But I do want to start off with the kind of lore here. So finding out that this planet is one, the home world of the Dathomirian witches, but also two, this is also sort of the ring around the planet is the graveyard of the Purrgil. This is why they sort of come here. They've chosen this planet to be where they die. And this explains, to some extent, of course, the idea of the Dathomirian witches, why they're in the other galaxy as well. Which speaks to an interesting idea about, there's the explanation for the two different kind of approaches to the Force, in a way. We have the typical Jedi Sith way in this galaxy, and then actually the kind of origin of the magics, in a way, comes from this other galaxy. So I do like that kind of reveal of just it developed different ways in different galaxies. And it's a major kind of backstory thing with the witches, to actually have their origin be from a different galaxy. They confirmed, I think Morgan Elsbeth said that they are sort of historically the first people to ever kind of ride on the Purrgil, and so I guess that explains how they got to the main Star Wars galaxy, which was pretty cool. So they did, in terms of the main reveal about Thrawn Ezra, really focus it in on just the idea that, oh yeah, it's just what's happening here on this planet, in or around here. It doesn't seem like we're going super crazy scope in terms of it's all about the exploration of this galaxy particularly. It's just this planet was of specific importance, and it makes sense because this explains the Purrgil, when they took Ezra and Thrawn away at the end of Rebels, it wasn't to a random location. It was basically to where they would typically go to die. So that's one thing. But then also the reveal that the planet that they go to effectively is also the planet of the witches. And then this is actually how they figured out how to get here in the first place, which was that the Night Sisters, being from kind of a different galaxy, were able to sort of contact Morgan Elsbeth, and that's the whole connection, how she actually knew where to find him. So the episode actually brought that together really nicely with those reveals. So that I thought was pretty well done. Otherwise, I think we probably best go through the episode focusing in on the characters. So first up, Ahsoka. We just get a quick scene at the start with Ahsoka and Hu Yang. I was a little bit disappointed that it felt like Ahsoka just almost it felt like we almost ignored the fact that episode 5 happened with what the conversation was about here to a certain extent. I liked what kind of got brought up. Again, they addressed the history that Hu Yang, as this ancient droid, was teaching literally history of the galaxy type lessons, and that includes the kind of in-universe kind of where the phrase "in a galaxy far, far away" comes from, which was cool. But Ahsoka, I think I'm waiting to see what the effect of the lesson in the World Between Worlds with Anakin is on her as a character. And obviously that's going to involve her and how she approaches dealing with all of these characters as we go forward, to see what has changed about her. This one felt a little bit like we went back to the sort of arms crossed, kind of slightly annoyed Ahsoka. But I think we're just waiting to see her get back into play with the rest of the characters before we really kind of come back around to that. We did address the whole idea that Ahsoka was aware from her psychometry that Sabine did go willingly with the enemy. She chose to do that. I like that Hu Yang does point out that, in a way, this was always going to be the choice that she made, given where she is sort of as a person. And, you know, in a way, there was no training that you could have done to, in a way, make her make a different decision. And so I really like that, because we're obviously going to have to wait and get into various characters' reactions to what Sabine has done, and in a way that her actions have maybe caused Thrawn to re-enter the actual galaxy, and, you know, we're at war again to a certain degree. But for Sabine, the decision, that is part of her character and who she is, the want to save Ezra, and that is understandable to a degree as well. And I think the contrast that probably Ahsoka has to have is to be more understanding of that choice, rather than very critical of it, and focusing on the idea of, yeah, getting back an ally, even if it means something bad happening. It doesn't always kind of have to be framed as being a negative, I suppose, basically. But that's that. So, then we go, kind of cut over to the villains, who, like, obviously hyperspaced first. They don't do a weird thing where they arrive at kind of roughly the same time. No, they arrive first. Very cool scene, seeing just the giant ring come out of hyperspace, and then we get the reveal of the kind of Purgle kind of ring graveyard and the planet, of course. So what way do we have to do this? So we're first introduced to the Night Sisters on the planet. So that's what we get here. We get is it Great Mother? So that's an interesting one, that there are other witches here on this planet. This planet is inhabited, it has species and stuff like that we haven't seen before. And there's the tease of kind of something more as well, as we'll get into. So we do have Sabine kind of being brought out. Interestingly, the witches focus on the idea that Sabine gives off the, what do they say, the scent or something like that of a Jedi. Which, is that just because she's been around in around Ahsoka, or is that actually a real big hope for, like, Sabine, that, like, wait, they consider me a Jedi? Whereas Baylan was right there, and they didn't treat him the kind of same. Now, maybe it's that because he's part of, like, Morgan's kind of, like, group, they know his situation with the Jedi, so they know not to say that. Because I think there was a scene kind of later on where they kind of looked at him a little bit kind of weirdly. But either way, the point here is that, like, Sabine had kind of an interesting thing said about her, which I think was kind of unexpected. So that's interesting. This mostly set up the idea that she's basically put in kind of prison on her own. Now, admittedly, that scene didn't really amount to all that much, because she was just more or less brought out then when Thrawn actually arrives. So, that's probably the next big thing to cover. So Thrawn arrives. It is the Chimera. It is his ship. He just has effectively the crew that was on that ship, and he hasn't formed more than that. But what we have seen here is a sort of evolution of his crew. They are, like, specialized now in a way. They have all the kind of red kind of cloth wraps, like the Night Sister red on them. His main commander, Enoch, has a gold kind of almost like theater style mask in the front of his helmet. So there's clearly this Dathomirian Night Sister influence on his troops, because I guess that's where they've got their supplies from, since they've been in this galaxy, really unable to maybe go anywhere else. But it's a really cool look. I like that they've done something to make his troops look different. It does make you wonder specifically, like, what is the sort of history of, like, how Thrawn got the allegiance of the Night Sisters. They seem to view him as being the true way that kind of destiny goes. He is sort of like destiny's chosen, and that if they follow him, it is the right path. The threads of fate almost are leading them to believe that he will shape the galaxy in the right way, and so that's why they are supporting him. how much does he specifically kind of care about them? He is showing them respect, but ultimately they are like allied with him. They are working for him. So once he probably doesn't push too hard, he has their loyalty. I'd like to get some more kind of details on the specifics here in terms of like how much does he know about them, because he obviously the Thrawn's strength as a character is that he learns about their culture, and through that learns about kind of individuals. And so I guess he just knows exactly now what way to handle kind of witches ultimately. How much he specifically knows about their force abilities and what is possible is a bit of an interesting one, but you know, it's a kind of unexpected element in a way of the story where, okay, you have the Morgan Elsbeth kind of connection. She was revealed to be Dathomirian. Okay, that's cool. We still probably don't know the connection there, so her backstory as such is a bit weird. But at least some of the connections are kind of beginning to be made here. But otherwise, he seems like he's completely ready to get back into the normal galaxy and do whatever it is that he wants to do. And that's probably the big thing with him as a character is, what does he want to do? Because I would say what the story setup is that the Empire now have their new leader. And we saw this kind of in Rebels a little bit, that Thrawn probably was the correct way to fully support Thrawn and will win the war. But he had to deal with the idea of, in a way, the inner politics of people in a similar position to him, of like his TIE Defender project up against like these various other projects and which one should get the focus. And he had to kind of fight to get what support his project actually got. So the idea seems to be now that a lot of that Empire politicking stuff should be out of the way. So when he comes back, he will reunite the Empire remnants around him, and he is going to effectively be the leader of the remains of the Empire. So that seems like it makes sense, but to what end? Because if you've read the novels, now I specifically mean the canon novels, not the Legends novels, the old Thrawn novels, his goal, as far as we're aware from those novels, is to form an alliance between the Empire and the Chiss, effectively to protect the Chiss, his own people, from outside threats. Mainly the Grisk in those books, but other threats from unknown regions. And I guess now he might be incorporating from other galaxies into that as well. Is that still part of what he is about these days? Is that it's still about the Chiss? Because that hasn't been brought up in any of the kind of like mainline material. If you haven't read the novels, you probably don't know anything about that. They haven't really placed any importance on his species in the main content in a way with him. So are we going to get into that? Or are we going to just move towards just presenting him as a calculating villain who is a planner, kind of like he was in Rebels? I would like to see more of the incorporation of like what his actual goals are, that he kind of realizes he has to get the Empire in control again so that he can accomplish his other goals. But I think that there's still quite a lot of development that I think needs to happen to get us there. I just hope they're willing to do that with Thrawn here, because I think everyone's aware that like there's so much potential with this character to really turn into a villain of this kind of interesting era of Star Wars, where we are telling this story across a variety of TV shows, and then we're hoping to maybe end it with a big, fantastic Star Wars movie. And that seems like a really interesting plan for the gap between episode 6 and 7 kind of material. And Thrawn is making for quite a good villain so far. So we just need to see more of the depth come out, because I think you could say that there are elements of disappointment with his characterization in Rebels, because they took away some of the nuance of the character. Because in a way it feels like, if you read the novels, do you consider Thrawn to be an evil character? You would say no. Like, probably like not at all. You would lean towards, he is a good character doing what he needs to do, but like the mistake is, in a way, he is so analytical, he is focused on the Empire as like this kind of resource kind of system to get what he wants. Whereas his weakness as a character is, of course, he's not good at politics. And obviously, this is why he, in a way, almost like can't get help from the New Republic, because that's all about politics. Everything is now going to be mired in politics. Whereas he comes into a relatively simplistic situation, I guess, taking control of the remnant empire. So that he kind of has the kind of simplistic kind of pathway he needs to kind of get what he wants. But I just want more of the depth to come out in all of this. There is the scene with Sabine. She's brought out before him, and the whole idea of her deal with Balin is brought up. And it's interesting because, of course, he knows her. Because he was in Rebels, he knows the Rebels crew. And he's like, oh, a familiar face. Always nice to see that after so long. We eventually just get to the idea that he's just perfectly fine with letting her go off. Like, drop her down on the planet. We'll give you a mount and supplies. You find Ezra. We'll give you all the information we have. We don't have him or anything like that. You find him. Just go. And for Sabine, it's a little bit of a moment like, oh, you actually think I've like really, really helped you here. And so you are actually like kind of paying me back here. Oh, now, of course, there's some lying kind of duplicity going on here where he does then basically send Balin and Shin after her with the idea of like, yeah, we'll let her, we'll agree to the promise. Let her find or search for Ezra. And if she does find him, then kill both of them. He wants those kind of obstacles out of his way. Because similarly then when Thrawn hears at the end of the episode that the Night Sisters tell him that there's another on the way, a Jedi. And there's the discussion about, like, I thought you said Ahsoka was dead. We have to now operate with the idea that she's alive. If any Purrgil arrives in system, kill it. Because this ruined his plan at the end of Rebels. He's just done with that. Highlighting the idea of he's factoring in what he's learned from losses in the past to make sure that that doesn't happen again. So that's an interesting one. Similarly, he does note the idea of like, okay, so it's Ahsoka Tano. Tell me everything you know about her. And now, canonically, I think the idea is that Thrawn should know, and I think he does know the basics, but I don't think he knows the super significance of it. Thrawn knows Anakin and Vader, and that they're the same. He does know Anakin had a Padawan named Ahsoka. It's just, I don't think it ever came up as being something that is like an importance necessarily. So now he's going to get the information he needs on Ahsoka. And he's going to try and use this to his advantage to sort of like get one over on her. And I think the assumption here would have to be that he is going to use the fact that he knows about the Anakin Vader situation to try and taunt her with that. But Ahsoka has seemingly already gotten past that in episode 5, so he will be surprised by basically the idea that she had this world between worlds crazy force kind of vision type thing that he couldn't possibly have accounted for, and that should be the thing that gives Ahsoka the edge here, at least in terms of Thrawn's kind of plans to maybe manipulate her in some way. So that is a bit of an interesting one to see whatever happens when that all kind of pans out. But yeah, I think Thrawn here, he is played, of course, by the actual actor who voices him in Rebels. And I think it was a good choice. The performance, I thought, was very good. I do wonder, like, maybe, like, physically, if there's going to be, like, action scenes involving Thrawn, if that's going to work, because he is actually a very good hand-to-hand fighter. Now, ultimately, his skills are more as a tactician, and so my assumption is that by the end of Ahsoka, he is back in the galaxy. We are going to get to see the fight against the kind of Remnant Empire, and he's going to show his skill in a lot of those more kind of fleet-style battles. So he probably maybe won't be overly involved in like hand-to-hand kind of action-type stuff, and I think that makes sense. He's probably just going to surround himself with troops who can do that for him. The likes of Morgan Elsbeth, is a decent fighter as well. But, if anyone does get up close to him, you kind of just wonder, like, does he have the full kind of strength that he needs to counter? Now, I suppose he's kind of thinking that, like, well, technically I have the Dathomirian witches, like, it's really strong magic force users. That's one thing to do. He has Balin, of course, there effectively on his side. But he does view them as being disposable. Is the kind of interesting point there. And I suppose getting into Balin, we got a couple of very interesting scenes with Balin and Shin, where we are once again addressing the whole idea of him as a Jedi who was around when the Order fell, and what is he about going forward. And I think even Shin is getting a little bit confused as to like what exactly he's about. And I think some of the questions that she asks him are actually quite interesting, where he's being very dismissive of like, no, you are not a Jedi. I have not trained you as a Jedi. Ezra was trained as a Jedi. You aren't. You're something more. And she's kind of like, I'm not sure I quite believe that. Do you miss it? Do you miss like being part of the Order? And he's like, I miss the idea of it. And I think you can tell from some of the way he's approached some of this stuff. I think he is frustrated that in a way the Jedi allowed themselves to fall. That this happened. And because of that he has this negative view. Otherwise, what it was, he absolutely loves. And it's not that he's completely turned on it. It's just, he feels the world is in this cycle of something ascends and then falls. Something ascends and then falls. The rise of the Jedi Order, fall of the Jedi Order. Rise of the Empire, fall of the Empire. And it's just this cycle of, destruction and something taken over. And he wants to apparently maybe solve this by... What did he say? It wasn't going back to the beginning. It was like finding the beginning and then ending the cycle. What does that mean? Because he's suggesting that there's something on this planet, a power that like a lot of the inhabitants like run from. There's a reason this is the Night Sister homeworld to a certain extent. There's a reason the Purrgil go to die here. A further significance to the planet. What is that? Because obviously they're implying that this is going to be like part of the downfall of what happens here. Is it some sort of a thing about like the world between worlds, where is he trying to do some weird time travel-y stuff and prevent the Order from falling in the first place? But he seems to be basically done with the Jedi. So is he just trying to almost like restart the world or something like that? Because aspects of what he says feels like he wants to kind of completely just destroy the universe and kind of just try again or something like that. But there's clearly something more going on here. Because obviously, like, Shin seems very suspicious of the night of the witches and stuff like that. There's been a few comments from her about like more witches. But, like, what's that all about? Like, where are we actually heading with those characters? I feel Ahsoka and Balin have to fight again, and I think I think what has to happen is that she has to represent, I think, in a way, the return of what a true Jedi is, or her to show him a path different from his own, but maybe not the Jedi. She just has to, I think, represent something different with her kind of evolution into Ahsoka the White here. And I'm fascinated to see where we actually go with that, because interestingly, one of the things that we do need to see, I think, with Ahsoka, if we're trying to connect the dots with Rebels, is that Ahsoka needs to get her weird staff thing that we have no clue about. That I think Dave Filoni commented about towards the end of Rebels, and I think he just said something along the lines of like, the staff is important, but I'm not telling you what it is right now. And I think after that brings us pretty much into what Sabine then does when she is kind of like let go on the planet. So she has an initial encounter with bandits, who then encounter Balin and Shin at the end, who we don't see what's really happening there. I'm guessing they're going to somehow use the bandits to, in a way, find out what they're afraid of and like go towards this like source at the center of the planet or whatever it is. But Sabine ends up defeating them. Interestingly, in the fight, she doesn't immediately go for the lightsaber. She's kind of struggling, getting hit a lot, but then she kind of succeeds when she actually does use the lightsaber. Again, there's a point earlier on in the episode where she tries to use the Force. It doesn't work. So there's still that whole point. She is given this creature, this kind of wolf-like creature thing, that they end up like focusing quite a bit on her actually getting a bit of a better relationship with it. It abandons her in the fight, but does come back, and she eventually comes around to kind of caring about it. It guides her to what seems like just a stream of water, but actually is some of the inhabitants of this planet, this alien species, these kind of, what they're called, I think the subtitles calls them the Noti, Noti, Noti. And so they're these kind of bug-like creatures in shells that are quite small. And what ends up happening is that they can't communicate, of course, because they speak different languages. But they notice on Sabine's kind of pauldron, like the same symbol that is on their necklace, which Sabine recognizes. Oh, you must have got that from Ezra, because I'm looking for Ezra. Do you know where Ezra is? And eventually she manages to get through to them, like, Ezra Bridger, you know this person, yes? And they bring her back to their kind of camp, which is revealed to be always moving. It's not just like a village. It's kind of a moving village. And so she arrives back, and you're just looking around and like, okay, this species, they live here. Great. And you think, like, the way this would typically work in a show with a big reveal like this is that they guide her over to the entrance. She walks in, slowly revealing Ezra. He's facing away from her. He turns around and he says hello, and we end it. We basically do what they did with Anakin and Ahsoka, but they didn't. Instead, she's just looking around. Like, they haven't directly maybe brought her towards Ezra just yet. And then the shot just pans over, and Ezra's there, and they just have a conversation. It's like, he's here. You finally found me. You finally succeeded. And obviously the main takeaway from this is that Sabine hasn't told him basically what she has done to get here. She is more focused on, can't we just have the happiness of our reunion kind of be the focus here, and like, we'll address the issues going forward. But it's very interesting that, in a way, some of the stuff that Ezra focuses on is like, you know, the plan worked, didn't it? Like me hyperspacing away with Thrawn, it worked. We won the war, didn't we? Yes. But the whole idea here is like, oh, you found me again. Surely you have an easy way to sort of sneak me out effectively. There's no way you've like given the enemy the way out as well, but like she basically has. And so there's all this stuff that does need to be addressed about like Ezra's view on the kind of sacrifice play that he actually made. He's happy to be back with Sabine, but is he going to have the same sort of approach that Ahsoka kind of has had to this, of like, we can't risk Thrawn getting out? Because that's the point that they're making here, is that if Thrawn wasn't hyperspaced away at the end of Rebels, he would have been around for the original trilogy, and the Empire would have won the war. I think the Rebels would have been defeated. That is the, I think, direct implication of what happened, is that Thrawn would have turned things around with his strategy, because he still would have had the whole Palpatine Vader stuff going on as well. But him being there would have been the turning point. And in a way, them getting rid of him allowed for certain victories to actually happen. And in a way, for the Rebels' tactics to overpower the Empire's kind of rigidity. So they weren't really coming across a master tactician. So now it's going up against that master tactician is the real threat to the galaxy going forward. So that setup, I think, is super strong. I of course want to see so much more with Ezra, to see kind of what's going on here. Like when it comes to the whole idea of like, the lightsaber is hers now, but surely Ezra needs his own lightsaber, or what? Like, what's he been doing all this time? Has he just been like living with this kind of native species on this planet? Does he know more? Has his powers increased in the Force? Because, you know, we've always known he has like special stuff. Like, he has a really strong connection to animals through the Force, and in a way, because of some of the stuff that happened in Rebels, he is a rather significant kind of Jedi character, and especially with like Ahsoka coming back in, it is going to be fascinating to see how all of this kind of like comes together, because Ezra's here, like, we can get him out, but it seems like the idea is ultimately like, instead of the obvious plan that the heroes would want would be to just get Ezra back, or what Ahsoka kind of wanted to do in the first place, let no one come back. It now seems like everyone's going to come back into the actual galaxy. We just need to see what the sort of complexities are going on here, because Balin's plan feels like something crazy is going to be set off here. And is that just going to be how we deal with him as a character? He gets himself into a bit of a mess, miscalculates the power of whatever it is he's trying to go after, and that's what gets him killed? Or is there something more to this? What is the character arc for like Shin and so on, everyone in all of this? Even Sabine, it still feels a little bit like there's still the clear tease of like, is she going to become a Jedi or not? Like, what way are we going with this? And in a way, now that Ezra is back, like, is he going to be the one who maybe trains her going forward? And maybe that's the idea. You know, we haven't come back to Hera in a little bit, but there's 2 episodes to go. And obviously we have to have the arrival of Ahsoka into the other galaxy. That's going to change things. And it feels like there's quite a few just almost interactions that kind of have to happen. Ahsoka and Thrawn have to interact for sure. It feels like Ahsoka and Balin have to interact. Sort of feels like Sabine and Shin probably have to have another fight. But I almost feel like there's more to her, so it can't just be that like Sabine kills Shin, or is that just the extent of her character? There's some fascinating things going on here overall. So I just hope the last 2 episodes deliver here, and especially like with the idea of like, is there going to be an Ahsoka season 2 or what? I'm assuming probably yes, because like the lineup of what exactly we're doing next is a little all over the place right now. So the assumption would have to be that like Ahsoka season 2 probably has to be a big part of kind of what's going on, unless they do some absolutely crazy stuff in these remaining episodes. So there are my thoughts on Ahsoka episode 6. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were, but that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.